Well, hello, everyone. My name is Lisa Spichka, and I am CEO at Maracuja Solutions, and I am really excited to be here today helping moderate and participate a bit in this panel about coopetition and sustainable packaging. And I'm here with a couple of great experts in this area. We've got Jake Hebert and Alyssa Harding. It's great to have you guys here today.
Thanks, Lisa. Happy to be here.
Yeah. So we're here to talk a bit about coopetition and sustainable packaging, as I mentioned today, because really from our experience, there exists a great opportunity to have pre-competitive collaboration in really any sector, any industry, in order to come together around opportunities to really forward environmental and social impacts through the work that we do in our businesses. And as sustainability still continues to really take hold and take a lot of different shapes, there's so much opportunity for all of us to come together, again, in any industry, to really make that happen. And I'm excited, as I said, to have Alyssa and Jake here today because they have done so much amazing work, especially in natural product industry, around sustainable packaging and really moving that forward in this coopetition type model, this pre-competitive collaboration in so many ways. So we're going to learn a little bit about that today and learn about, what initiatives are out there, how are people coming together, so sort of the who, what, how of this pre-competitive collaboration around sustainable packaging. And at the end of everything, you should be able to walk away with a strong understanding of transferable concepts from the work that we've been doing and talking about in this panel and proliferate that in the work that you do as well. So I'm going to turn to our guests here and just ask Jake and Alyssa to introduce themselves. Maybe Jake, we can start with you.
Sure, thanks, Lisa. My name is Jake Hebert. I'm the Sales and Marketing Manager with Futamura. We are a compostable films manufacturer and work with a number of co-suppliers, brands, retailers throughout the world, basically focused on changing conventional petroleum-based plastics to more sustainable, plant-based, and compostable options.
Great, thanks.
And my name is Alyssa Harding. I'm the Director of Operations and the Packaging Collaborative Lead at OSC. They're a nonprofit trade association that's focused on tackling the most challenging issues facing our industry. And our Packaging Collaborative was founded about 7 years ago with the purpose to find ways to transition away from plastic packaging, really focusing on market-driven solutions for flexible films. And Jake and Futamura are one of our partners in that endeavor.
Great, thanks for that. And as I mentioned, I'm CEO at Maracuja Solutions and have a lot of great different projects on my plate as a result of that. And one of those projects actually has been doing a lot of work with another partner that has sort of worked its way into the sustainable packaging space in a couple of ways, and that's the Sustainable Food Trade Association. So I'll mention a couple of things here and there from their perspective as well, and be able to talk a little bit about supply chain integrity programs that I've worked with across the world and how we look at being able to really integrate sustainable packaging or other sustainability initiatives into global supply chains. So that's the experience and perspective we bring to the talk today. And I'm going to dive into the panel here now. We don't have too much time, but I think we're going to be able to cover a lot of interesting topics. So, what I really wanted to start with to ground the audience and really ground the topic is to understand from you two your perspective on, how you would describe coopetition in the sustainable packaging world and why it is that it can actually help companies grow and succeed versus, be taking away competitive advantage from, other companies or from your own company to be in this coopetition model or make cooperative efforts.
Yeah, and I'm happy to start. I think it's as simple as the rising tide raises all ships. And especially for our industry, when you're thinking about natural products, many of our companies have a mission-driven aspect to the nature of their business operations. And so it just makes a lot of sense that if you're trying to tackle an incredibly daunting systems level challenge, that you should find ways to cooperate. And I think our shared mission outweighs any needs for, NDAs and thinking more through that lens of competition rather than collaboration. And the packaging system as it stands today has been optimized for pricing and efficiency. So it's taken decades to get to where we are today. The proliferation of plastic is something that many of us understand. And so for us, compostable packaging is that solution. And right now there's a lot of barriers, infrastructure barriers, consumer awareness barriers, even pricing when it comes down to the decision makers at the brand level. So finding ways to collectively address those barriers allows us to move forward, identify rapid innovation prototypes. And I think when you can fail faster, you can also learn faster. And so the idea is that keeping forward momentum on those milestones.
Yeah, some great points. And to kind of to piggyback on that, yeah, there are still a lot of barriers out there in this space, but something that we have seen a lot of improvement in over the years has been in the the performance and the functional attributes of sustainable packaging. And I would say one market that I can speak to where we've seen a lot of this advance is in the coffee market. Without speaking of anyone specific, but you can go to the store and see there's a lot of coffee brands on the shelf, and they have a lot of different ways to stand out, whether it be through their flavor and aroma, or how their beans are grown, or where they're grown. But when you look at them collectively, they all have pretty similar requirements as far as what that package needs to do to protect that coffee. So there's really ways there for companies to get together, take shared learnings in how their ingredients and products are protected by different types of materials that are out there, and share that across a number of brands. They still have a lot of ways to differentiate themselves on the shelf, but that package, if they're trying to develop that on their own, it's a long and expensive and a difficult process. But doing it as a group of brands really helps to drive that forward in a much more effective way.
Mm-hmm. So actually, I'd like to dig into that a little bit more. So I feel like, Alyssa, working with OSC, a great association in the natural product industry, you work directly representing a lot of those brands, unifying those voices, bringing them to the table. And then, Jake, coming from the packaging side and the manufacturing and all the engineering, those are the two distinct nodes you represent, right? So how did you all, and I'm asking this again as a way to help illustrate, how can these efforts be born? What does it take to come together? So how did you guys get together around this project? And, what does the road look like that you've traveled together to really get to the point you're at? So tell us about your collaboration.
Yeah, well, I'll let Jake kick it off this time because he's one of the founding material partners of OSC. So he can kick us off and then we'll give a little additional insight.
Sounds good. Thanks, Alyssa.
Yeah.
So yeah, OSC came together many years ago, basically the result of a conversation that was being had by a couple of CEOs of natural foods brands in the Bay Area, who all saw a common goal to develop more sustainable packaging, and ended up being the beginning of OSC squared. And Futamura, at the time, we were actually known by a different name. We were a company called Inovia Films. But our brand is the same, NatureFlex. That was seen as the first material partner that these brands wanted to investigate, our compostable cellulose-based films. So we were invited to become a material manufacturer partner with OSC2, and working with converters and brands in the group, started the development process, taking our material, combining it with different complementary compostable materials, which have all developed quite a bit over the last several years. This is kind of how we started going down this path, and we and all of our brand partners and all of our converter and co-supplier partners have learned a lot in this process. We started out not really knowing where these materials would go and what they would be able to do, but we've really come quite a long way in understanding how to put together different combinations of materials to get different functional attributes out of the final package. So working with OSC2 over the years has given us a wonderful opportunity to be part of that long-term solution for these brands that are involved.
Yeah, and I would say our work is definitely oriented around a diversity of stakeholder perspectives, right? And like Jake mentioned, we have waste haulers, we have converters, we have material providers, we have brands, we have decision makers from all elements of, departmental teams within these companies who come to our collaborative meetings to find these, cooperative solutions. And what Jake was also referring to is we really focused on shared learnings. And so one of the greatest successes that I feel like we've had in the past few years is our test and learn project. So again, Public-private partnerships are also a big part of success in driving sustainability forward. And we work with Clemson University. We do rapid shelf life testing on some of the structures that Jake was discussing. And so as a way to do this, partnering with the university creates a cost competitive structure for doing these tests. And then we use these tests as a directional indicator to move forward on compostable structures. So that's one piece of the puzzle. One more recent piece of the puzzle that we've been working on is the end of life. And so presently, we all understand within our little sector that composters don't want to accept compostable packaging because they see it as a contaminant. At this point, it's very difficult to distinguish a compostable wrapper from a conventional plastic wrapper. And so it's understandable that composters don't want to accept that. So now we're working with CMA, the Composter Manufacturing Alliance, to do field testing. So now when you have the finished product from Jake that is, BPI certified, ready to go, certified compostable, now we can send that to CMA, work in a variety of locations with a variety of composting types, and create a foundation so that composters no longer see our materials as a waste. They're going to see them as an improvement. And so those are, I think, two essential pieces of what we're working on.
And just to add to that, just speaking to the co-opetition aspect of OSC2, and it's kind of the theme of our talk today, there are a lot of brands involved in this who are in the exact same space. I mean, we have multiple brands that are involved in the tea space, multiple brands that are involved in a certain grain or quinoa or confectionery, brands who are effectively, competing on a shelf, but who see this goal of a bio-based and compostable package as being something they can, collectively pursue.
It's so interesting to hear about the ecosystem that really has to develop to support a broad-based system change like the one that you're trying to tackle. And interesting to hear how, you had to have brand support, which hopefully means that there's going to be some demand out there immediately on the uptake, right? Which is a great thing for Futamura to know, but also the possibility of being an innovator and being out there in that space. That's a great incentive, I think, for Futamura. And wow, I love the partnerships you talk about with universities, Alyssa, to really help, work some of the kinks out of the system that you all are working on. So it's really dynamic and exciting to hear about. Let's see here. I just want to take a couple moments I know we have a lot of engineers in the audience, and I just feel like it would be great for them to understand a little bit, maybe if we could even just, Jake, a couple of minutes, here's some of the most interesting highlights of the development work that Futamura has been doing. So we keep talking about this cool sustainable packaging and the developments. What is that looking like? Could you just do a little bit of technical know-how out there for us?
Yeah, absolutely. So when you look at a package, what looks or feels maybe like a single layer of film is actually, in many cases, a sandwich of a bunch of different materials that have all been brought together to impart all the different functional attributes that the package needs to have. We break it down into the ABCs that a package needs. It needs appearance, barrier, and containment. It has to have the right aesthetic, and it has to be printable. That speaks to the appearance aspect. The barrier is what protects the product from oxygen, from moisture, protects the aroma, basically extends the shelf life and keeps it safe on the shelf. And the containment is very simply, a package has to stay closed and contain what it's supposed to hold. So in some cases, a single material can do all of those things, but in many cases, it's a combination of materials that are brought together in flexible packaging through lamination, basically gluing these different types of films together. So our compostable NatureFlex film is very good at it's printable, it has good barrier, but it doesn't have very effective seals. So a lot of the innovation we've seen over the last several years has been in that containment zone. These different plant-based polymers coming online, like very high-tech PLAs and PHAs that are derived from bacteria, PBS, which is a really interesting compostable synthetic polymer. A lot of things happening in this area, as well as all of the add-on ingredients, all of the inks and adhesives. These are things that have really come quite a long way in the last really just 2 or 3 years. We've seen a lot of innovation in that. So we're really looking at all of these different building blocks, all being developed at one point kind of on their own, but now through collaboration with brands and also among co-suppliers, really being developed in tandem looking at that end result as where we want to get to. So that's I've seen that as being the biggest innovation in the last couple of years, is all these different building blocks coming together.
Cool. Alyssa, anything else to add to that?
Yeah, and I think there's something else I could mention too, which is we recently hosted a Flexible Film Summit. So it was called Redesigning Flexible Films in partnership with Rainchild Design. And that was really focused on bringing together 80 different companies, 80 stakeholders across the industry. So going beyond the scope of our packaging collaborative and really bringing in material experts, waste haulers, composters, policy and like legislative affairs perspectives, so that we really could identify those barriers to scale. And while Jake gives a great technical expertise, which is why we love him and Futamura so much as our material partner, I think that there's a lot of things to take into consideration. And when you're thinking about circularity and sustainable packaging design, it's not just about the material, but obviously that's a very essential part. You have to think too about designing, materials, infrastructure, consumers. I mean, there's so many elements that when you have a systems level issue, it requires a holistic solution. So that summit brought together these 80 different companies. We identified over 1,000 potential possible pathways to action and ended up aligning around 8 key projects. And so now we're working on these incubation projects that are tackling policy frameworks, that are tackling education in schools around composting, that are bringing in the haulers and the waste managers to really identify those solutions, like I mentioned with CMA, like what are our biggest barriers to getting this accepted. So I think always having that high level systems thinking behind your work when it comes to sustainability is really important.
Great. Well, I actually love that you talked about that summit a little bit, Alyssa, because I wanted to get your input, both from you and Jake, on what are other coopetition type efforts or pre-competitive collaboration efforts that you've seen happening in the industry. I think I'm going to go ahead and mention for a moment that there's a really exciting sustainable packaging impact assessment tool, a software tool that Sustainable Food Trade Association has been working on in conjunction with OSC and also our partner, the Climate Collaborative. And we've been working with software company How Good, who actually has their Lattice software, they call it. And we've been collaborating together to really envision what could an evaluatory software system be that could help companies understand the types of impacts their sustainable packaging has, or just their packaging in general has, and identify what might be pathways or options for making their packaging a little bit more sustainable. And it's been a really exciting collaboration because, first at Sustainable Food Trade Association, there was a core group of companies who were noodling on this idea of, they weren't quite winning an LCA, which really digs into some very specific numbers and some very specific data. So they were looking for something that was different than a life cycle assessment, that would be a really readily accessible and understandable tool that sustainable packaging buyers could use to assess, again, what's more sustainable here? Would I want to go with this packaging? Would I want to go with this packaging? And so we developed this concept at SFTA, and then that's really grown. And I don't know, Alyssa, if you want to talk a bit about, how that grew from this concept and this prototype to now this fledgling software that's getting ready for launch.
Yeah, and fun fact, I'm pretty sure Jake and I were both working with Lisa on the RAP group at SFTA, which then sort of grew into this new concept. And I think all of us found value in having a quick impact assessment that was catered to the environmental and social metrics that were material to our brands. And so that was a big focus of, we know that a lot of times there's not a sustainability manager per se in a lot of these smaller companies. So how can we make it easier to make sustainable decisions? So that was kind of the idea behind it. And then it's grown since then, where now we're incorporating LCA data on the back end. There's a plan to also have competitor and category benchmarking so that you can better make the business case to your executive team on these decisions beyond the intrinsic value that at least the three of us understand when it comes to sustainable packaging. And so I think the idea behind that tool, and the idea too behind some other collaborative tools that we've been working on, like Google also has been developing a single-use material scorecard that's very focused on like food service rather than CPG, consumer packaged goods products. So these are all great examples of ways to create open source technology to really elevate the decision making behind all of these brands.
And the cool thing is that you bring into play, three organizations working on it. We work together because we said, this is potentially a really big project. Let's go in together on investing in this, right? So we took it beyond just this prototype stage to approach a company who had already some existing software that could really help us scale it and bring it to life. And so it was really fun to approach How Good with this idea and to have seen it grow, so it's really taking shape, and it's great to work together between like-minded, in this instance, nonprofits, but frankly, it probably could have just as easily have been, a few for-profits coming together with this concept and doing the same thing, right? So it's another example of a co-opetition path, I think, that it's not limited to associations. Companies could just as well approach a type of project like this and then find a service provider like How Good who could help them scale that answer. And it's been a really great project so far. Jake, what else is out there for you in the non-OSC related but still sustainable packaging co-opetition area?
Sure. So I'm happy to speak to a few interesting things happening inside the BPI. So BPI, for anyone who's not aware, is the Biodegradable Products Institute. They're the third-party certifier that validates all packaging and products as being compostable based on some tests and standards that they certify to. And for a long time, that's kind of been their main role. They've been a certifier, but have really wanted to become more of an industry voice as well as kind of a hub of info for people that are interested in this type of packaging, composters, municipalities alike. So one thing that we set up a little over a year ago is this really great manufacturers consortium, which is under the umbrella of BPI. This is a group of manufacturers, just speaking to the raw material side, that look at the market as a whole and identify, what types of things should we be working on that will fill a lot of gaps that are out there on the technology side. Whether it be a new type of adhesive that will work on specific equipment, or a new type of film that we can manufacture to a thin gauge and work for a number of different types of products. So we've really been trying to work collectively to help answer some of those questions as to what does the market need, and how can we as the raw materials manufacturers supply those types of things to the market. Also, something that's happening in BPI I think is pretty interesting. Previously, to be part of BPI, you had to have a certified product. We've now opened it up under something called the stakeholder membership, where any brand or retailer or composter can become part of the BPI, have a voice in all the subcommittees that talk about legislative outreach, consumer outreach, standards and procedures within the BPI, as well as giving a voice on BPI's board of directors. So the stakeholder membership has been really great for again, all these different brands that might be in a competitive space, but all get to come together with this collective goal of progressing this packaging in the marketplace. And certainly, as Lisa mentioned earlier, the composter outreach and the education side is a huge part of that puzzle. And this gives brands another outlet to be involved in those types of conversations.
Great. Well, we're just about at the end of time here. We knew the conversation would go quickly, and it has. So I guess here in the last couple of minutes, what are maybe some closing thoughts that you both might have around, where the sustainable packaging movement's going, or practical steps that our audience can take to try to influence some movement in the sustainable packaging innovation area?
Yeah, I would say, start with identifying your low-hanging fruits, and that might be a particular product line or a structure that you're working with that you can easily transition. I would also advocate for, taking a deep dive into consumer insights and retail trends, and also working within your target markets on the municipal level, because recently I have been trying to help the city of Boulder support a circular packaging pilot. And so there are ways to leverage existing efforts so that you can aggregate your resources, your experience, your bandwidth, and really drive projects forward faster.
Yeah, and I would say, certainly for any brands that want to be involved, certainly reach out to any of the groups that we've mentioned today. I think they're really great resources. I would say when you start down this path, to really make sure that you understand your product and the the functional requirements for your packaging very well. Understand that there may be trade-offs when going to a sustainable package. We've really come a long way in the last several years on the material space, but we still have a long way to go. So there may be trade-offs to shelf life or aesthetic, and really understand what are kind of the non-negotiables with your brand, and that's certainly a good place to start. But I see this type of packaging becoming more popular as consumers we see are more and more asking brands to please at least take a look at it and see what's possible. It's not always possible to move to a compostable package, but if the if the materials are there and they work for your product, then it's certainly something that's worth taking a look at.
Yeah, I love that you brought up the that there's trade-offs, right? Because usually there is some sort of trade-off. And just want to emphasize as a closing remark from my part that when you're thinking about making these types of moves, it's such an important piece to really bring in your supply chain partners with you, not just your packaging manufacturers, but talk to your customers, talk to the people who are upstream and downstream from you in the supply chain, and let them know that you're interested in moving in this direction, and not just from a top-down perspective from your company, but really collaboratively identify what is that vision that you have for sustainable packaging together. Because as Jake said, when you hit that moment where maybe you have to make a decision on a trade-off, having those goals in place, having that vision in place, and the alignment between you and your supply chain partners is just priceless. And that really sets the compass for those efforts and the movements you make in your industry. So Alyssa and Jake, it's always a pleasure. It was really nice to spend this time with you. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Lisa.
Yeah.
Thanks both. Great speaking with you as always.
Yeah, and thanks to Informa Markets, and I hope that you all enjoy the rest of your conference. Thanks so much.
Did you know you can interact through the chat with 150 exhibitors on our virtual expo floor? The expo features top companies from across the engineering and manufacturing, design and supply chains, everything from materials to finished products, many of which are hosting giveaways throughout the week. Be sure to visit the virtual expo floor and set meetings with key exhibitors or chat through the message window.